I'm Mike Toller.
And I'm Brett Bader. We are currently joined by Carlos Acosta, who is running for county board in McHenry County. Carlos?
Thank you very much for having me on. Like you had said, my name's Carlos, and I'm running for county board for District 5. District 5 basically covers most of Woodstock, the village of Lakewood, well, half the village of Lakewood, the east side of Huntley, and the west side of Lake in the Hills. I decided, I'll be honest, like many people in the county, for many years that I lived here, I didn't really pay attention to the county board, didn't know what they did, didn't know what their function was. When I started attending county board meetings, the first thing that really got me interested in running was when you look up at who the current county board members are, you see retired person, lawyer, business owner, lawyer, retired person. I didn't really feel that they were really had the perspective of working folks and working families in the county. Not that I'm questioning their wanting to serve and do work, again, but I think because that's the place that they're starting from, that's how they then oversee and legislate and make decisions for the county. So that was one of my first reasons for getting involved. The other is I'm a social worker. I've been a state employee for 20 years. I've done both casework and right now I'm a child protection investigator for DCFS. So again, I interact a lot with county government, not necessarily the county board members, but county government. So I really started to dig into what are the county services that county government provides. So I really started to pay attention to the health department, the mental health board, obviously the transportation department, and the jail. You know, those are really services that no municipality provides that service. You know, if you're traveling from Wonder Lake or Huntley to Woodstock, at some point you're going to cross a county road. That's under the county's jurisdiction, and they're responsible for the maintenance. You know, I drive in the middle of nowhere in the county, and I see county bridges that have been shut down for months at a time because the county hasn't had a chance to repair it. So those were some of the things that I don't know that the county board has really paid a lot of attention and really done a lot of oversight on those departments. So I also wanted to get involved again to make sure that those services that county residents depend on are going to be available and are going to be quality services.
Well, thank you for the introduction. So we'll move with the first question, which is, what one thing motivated you above and beyond all else that you talked about in your introduction there? What one thing motivated you to run for this office?
I would say probably the one thing that motivated me was what I felt was the lack of support and perspective for organized labor on the county board. You know, again, I've been a state employee for many years. When Governor Rauner became governor and he had his turnaround agenda, obviously my union, which is AFSCME, fought very hard to push back on that agenda. And I was, two things really struck me. One was the lack of support for organized labor on the county board, but also the power of organized labor on the streets. There's a lot of union members in McHenry County. I honestly didn't realize that until the turnaround agenda really pushed labor in the county on the streets, and to push back and to really engage their county board members. And when I saw that kind of disconnect between representation on the county board and labor on the streets, I was like, that has to change. There has to be someone on the county board that is going to be supportive of labor and obviously serve as a conduit to make sure that the county board is supportive of organized labor, meets the needs of their workforce.
Okay. Follow-up question, since you talked about organized labor, how do you feel like you could impact on the board with their continued kind of ignoring of the law if you will, where they're required to pass that acknowledgement of the what's the word I'm looking for?
Prevailing wage.
Prevailing
wage.
wage. Thank you. Yes. See, you knew where I was going with that.
Well, and I think even in the last 2 years, it has been a change on the county board. Again, I take that just because of the power of organized labor on the streets. When Governor Rauner first got elected, and there was a vote for prevailing wage, it lost. It lost fairly dramatically, and then organized labor started to get active in the county. There was a variety of public actions that organized labor was involved in. This last vote, the prevailing wage actually passed, I believe, with only 4 county board members voting against it. But even before that, I think because of the power of organized labor, there were several candidates, there were several incumbents on the county board that had been opposed to prevailing wage, had not been friendly to organized labor, who chose not to run for re-election. So now you've got other candidates that obviously my hope is that they would be supportive of organized labor. With regards to prevailing wage, I think, again, I would be a very vocal advocate. I think that there's current board members that send the wrong message about the goal for prevailing wage, obviously, and I don't know that there's anybody on the board right now that is willing to counterbalance that. You've got people that try to portray prevailing wage as anti-competition and being too costly for the county. Nobody speaks out to give the positives of prevailing wage, that it is actually protecting the middle class. It was created to prevent cheap labor from coming in outside of the state and undercutting wages. No one on the board right now, pardon my language, has the balls to say that.
You don't need to pardon your language here.
No.
And that needs to be said. That counter message needs to get out there. Ideally, that's going to sway some votes. If someone sees that there's someone on the board that is willing to speak positively about prevailing wage, again, my hope is that, again, my goal would be that at least there's a balanced conversation on the county board, not a constant negative attack on organized labor.
Awesome, thank you. Hey, you have any follow-up questions to that first one, Brett?
I do. What are your feelings about them pulling up a vote once a year on something that's state law? Other than just politicizing the entire spiel, why even do it?
Well, I believe the state law does require that vote every year.
Is it every year?
Yes. That vote has to, by state law, each new board must acknowledge that prevailing wage. It's a state law that requires it.
But is that every year, or is that with every board?
Every year.
Okay.
Right, and I, as I understand it, part of the confusion comes in is really what that vote is doing is just certifying this is what the wages are going to be for this year, because obviously prevailing wage changes based on the market and what employers are saying should be the prevailing wage. So that's part of it. Is A, they're saying they're gonna pay prevailing wage, but B, they're also saying these are the wages we're gonna pay. This is the published wage for this year.
Right, and as I understand it, whether or not they pass that,
Right, they're still gonna pay it.
Yeah,
they're still gonna pay it.
Mm-hmm.
So on the one hand, it is kind of silly. I assume when that statute was already passed, it served a purpose. I think life moves a lot more quickly now than it did. So, but obviously that would be a task for the General Assembly to change that statute and not have that requirement.
All right.
All right, now, next question. Would you have any probable conflict of interests?
Not that I'm aware of. The only conflict I would probably have would honestly be more specific if something came before the county board that had specifically to do with the department that I work for, which is the Department of Children and Family Services. But I don't foresee that happening.
All right. Well, I don't think I have any follow-up questions to that. You good?
Yep.
All right. Moving on to the next written question. What are your thoughts on cutting the board down from 24 to 12?
In general, I support cutting the board. Definitely. I think that 24 is too many. There's been lots of conversation. Should it be 12? Should it be 18? I do agree that, since we have a little bit of time before redistricting, that should be a public process that should be opened up to members of the community as opposed to just the board deciding their own fate. I think where I differ with some other candidates is that I am a proponent of single member districts. I think that's the best way to hold board members accountable. Right now you've got 6 districts with 4 people. So like in my district, I'm sure it's very easy for board members to shift blame. Well, that's not my problem. That's Mike Green's problem. That's not my problem. That's Mike Scala's problem. To make the comparison, I live in Jack Franks' old legislative district, the 63rd. If there's a problem going on in the 63rd district, I know who to go talk to. I would go talk to Jack Franks. That's his district. So I am a supporter of single-member districts. How those lines would be drawn, I don't know. Would I be okay with 12? Yes, I'd be okay with 12. Anything less than 24, it's too big. It's too big. It takes too long to make decisions with a board that big.
All right. Now, with the redistricting, you know that they're planning on redoing the districts shortly. Okay. Now, what if they come out and they say, here's your redistricting. Now, you can have 4 people in a district, but they've been sectioned off. So they keep the 24, but now you have kind of like being a precinct committeeman. You have your own section. Would you be okay with that?
No, because again, you're still having 24 members, and again, if you're having a sub-district, that's not you're almost diluting someone's influence and responsibility. Just call it a district.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If they decide to redraw the districts and there's 24 districts now all of a sudden instead of just 6.
No, I think again the goal is to reduce the size of the board. Where I think I've differed with others is to have single member districts versus, again, instead of having 24 members, you go to 12, but you have 4 districts of 3. Again, I still believe that the best way to hold someone accountable is to make them responsible for one person, one district. And I know that the county board has already started that conversation. But no, I think that would just be shuffling the cards to make it 24 single-member districts.
I don't think I have a follow-up question to that. You want to hit the next written question?
What are your overall views on consolidations, voting or township-wise?
I think it's a process that has to be well thought out. I do think that if some cost savings can be shown, consolidation certainly should be considered. I don't know that consolidation for consolidation's sake, just so that you can say you consolidated something, is worth it. Again, there has to be a purpose behind consolidating. Either a cost savings or some sort of improved oversight on the district that's being consolidated into something else. Again, consolidation for consolidation's sake is just kind of shuffling the cards. But again, I'm not opposed to it, and I think that there would be. There are already examples where consolidation has happened and can work. One of my PCs was on the Lake in the Hills Sanitary District, which is being absorbed into another sanitary district, and it is going to show some cost savings. But again, that was shown up front. Those numbers were shown and proven, and it showed that it made sense. A lot of other consolidation efforts that are kind of floating around the county right now is one of those consolidate for the sake of consolidation, and they've either not done their homework or are refusing to do their homework in terms of really showing that it would bring a benefit to the taxpayers.
One comes up to mind, Bob Anderson.
You talking about specifically the consolidation of the highway department at Algonquin Township into the township. Is that what you're trying to get at?
No, that's McHenry Township.
Oh, Bob Anderson. Yeah, sorry, I just jumped from one to the other. Interesting thing. I was going to do a follow-up question on that because I was just at the McHenry Township meeting this past week, and they just voted to send a letter to multiple townships in the area to look at consolidating the townships down into 4 quadrant townships in the county. So, what are your thoughts on something like that? Instead of, we've seen talk of elimination of the townships, but reduction in the townships?
I think that's a fine line, and that's a fine line. Ultimately, it would be up to the people in that area what they want to do. But again, as a state employee, one of the biggest criticisms I've heard has been the criticism of quote unquote big government. Again, if you start making townships bigger, at what point do you lose that local control? Because now you've got a township that is so far removed because they're trying to do too much with too little. And again, then you start getting into the argument, well, this is big government and there is no local control because now you've got townships that are almost the size of the county.
Well, I'd tack onto that too by saying if you're going to bring it down to 4, just give all the control to the county and call it a day.
Right.
What the shit?
Yeah, and I think what tends to get lost in the conversation is the fact that every township is different. McHenry Township has the same name as Grafton Township, but they're structured very differently and they provide different service, and they're obviously different than Chemung Township. Chemung Township doesn't have a bus service, doesn't have a senior program, doesn't do half the things that McHenry Township provides. And then I had a friend that worked for Hanover Township. Hanover Township had their own social service department. She was a therapist for the township. So again, every township is structured differently and has to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. Again, not opposed to consolidation, but not consolidation for consolidation's sake.
All right, and I just want to kind of, for everybody listening, I know that's not technically a county board controlled question, but with the actions of Jack Franks recently trying to push Algonquin Township with their consolidation, it's kind of turned into a county board issue because of that.
Right, and I think some of that, he's trying to make a county issue because, again, the legislation that was passed said, okay, if you abolish a township, all those responsibilities then revert to the county. Which again, you start crossing that fine line between small government and big government. I live in Woodstock, and there's many folks that say, yes, I live right outside the city limits. My services are, Door Township is not as responsive as the city of Woodstock. So again, that's a fine line that really has to be studied and analyzed because you don't want to go backwards.
I know exactly what you're talking about. You're technically an unincorporated Wonder Lake right here. We're just outside Wonder Lake's city limits, if you will. Did you have any more follow-up questions to that one?
Nope.
Yeah, I didn't know the term unincorporated until I moved to McHenry County.
It is kind of in the northern Illinois area. We have probably the most unincorporated areas.
Probably.
That's just me talking out of my ass. But just by judging driving all over the place for work. So then, next written question, if you're good with the your answer on the township stuff, would be, what's your position on privatization talk of the Valley High Nursing Home?
Again, talk about going backwards. That is one thing that I did actually pay attention to, and right now, nobody's really given me a solid argument on why it should go back to being a privately run facility. You know, my recollection is that when it was previously privately operated, and it did terribly, which is why the county took it back and started to run it themselves, and obviously now they have a surplus. So again, my gut tells me the thought of privatizing is a money grab by somebody that sees an operation with a big surplus. I'm not a supporter of privatization in general. If it's not broken, why fix it?
All right, I think that's a pretty succinct, outstanding, well thought out answer there. So, now to the next one then, because I don't think I have any follow up questions.
Yeah, I'm good too.
Well, I mean, I would throw out again, even as a state employee, I do know that opportunities can and will present themselves for the use of private contractors. You know, and again, I had said in general I'm opposed to privatization. That's not to say I'm not willing to explore it if it provides a service that is not currently provided by public employees and would not impact their jobs. You know, I think that again, I've worked both in the private sector and in the public sector, and for a private nonprofit, and I think that there are specific tasks that possibly could be contracted on a private basis, on a short-term basis. Again, if it's not already being provided by a public employee, and would not result in the loss of a public employment. You know, I do believe that even if you're looking at privatization, you should explore if the public employees can do it first or better. You know, many studies have shown that yes, privatization can work, but it also can do it really badly. And again, having been a state employee, I've seen lots of examples where something was privatized and it went really badly. And then again, the state had to take it back.
And then what's that one saying I've heard before? The privatization of profits, but socialization of losses. Yep.
Small off-topic little aside here. Interesting thing I just heard about the other day on the radio is that it's a situation just like that. Mike Pence's father and his gas stations.
Oh,
they
yeah.
went bankrupt, and now it's up to the states to clean up
it
the
all
mess.
Yep.
And that's where you get into those problems of,
It's okay, he was
privatization of
governor.
profits. Yeah.
Right, and there was a unfortunately an example within my own department, and it was a very painful personal experience. For the bulk of the time that I worked for the department, I was a caseworker. And for a good part of that time, I was in a program called Intact Family Casework, where I worked with families that had been found to have been abusive or neglectful, but not so much where they needed to have their children removed. They got to stay with their kids. I would go in, I would work with them on a monthly basis, weekly basis. I would probably work with them for about 18 months, and I would see improvements. Well, our director at the time, probably about 2012, decided to privatize that entire job function. He admitted that it was a cost that he was doing it for cost savings, and it was privatized. And AFSCME obviously made lots of, in my opinion, convincing arguments opposed to that, but he did it anyway. That's why I now do investigations, because I was given an option: get laid off or become an investigator. Well, that was in 2012, so 2013 I started doing investigations, and the program did pretty badly, to the point where about a year or so ago, some fairly public child deaths occurred with families that were being worked with privately. And now, again, the department has decided to take that program back within the department and have it run internally.
All right.
You good?
I'm good. You
All right.
good?
I'm good. Next one up. What one part of county government would receive more attention if you were elected?
The jail. I'll be point blank, the jail. Because I don't think it receives a lot of attention to begin with right now, for a variety of reasons. From having worked with the past sheriff, it's been fairly obvious to me that there's a perception on the county board that the most powerful person in the county is not the county board chairperson. It's the sheriff. Obviously, with the addition of the ICE contract, he's become even more powerful, because really the jail is now the only profit center for the county. It makes money. It doesn't spend money. And obviously that buys the sheriff's office a lot of power on the county board. But there hasn't been a lot of oversight of that contract and of that program. When I started looking at county board minutes, pretty much the only thing that the sheriff reports to the county board as a whole is, this is the number of detainees we had this month. Other than that, there is not a lot of information that is shared. During the prior administration of Sheriff Nygren, he was actually more open with the program. I talked with him pretty regularly. I was doing a lot of more community work back then. Under Sheriff Prim, we haven't gotten a lot of information out with regards to the jail and the detainee program. So again, that would be one of the areas that I would want to focus on a lot more, is the jail.
You kind of jumped the gun on a question on the last one, but so we'll follow up there on that one.
Sure.
But
well, and again, I would even say in general, when I'm on the door, I tell folks, I'm not paying attention to the county board. I'm paying attention to county government. I'm paying attention to the service providers that the county board oversees. The health department, the mental health board, transportation, and the jail. The health department, again, as a social worker in the county, I know that the health department runs out of immunizations 2 or 3 times a year. Because a lot, and that's a very complicated answer. I started talking to nurses at doctors' offices, again, kind of understand. And again, I give the message that the craziness in Springfield and Washington eventually has an impact on this county. Okay, you may not see the correlation, but it's there. The state used to have a program that would reimburse private doctors for buying and administering immunizations. As I was doing my work, I started hearing a lot of private doctors saying, well, no, they go to the health department for their immunizations. We don't do that anymore. So finally I asked the question, why? Well, they said, A, over time, the state's reimbursement wasn't enough to cover our costs. And then B, obviously during the budget stalemate, they weren't even paying us. So eventually we had to make a decision. Do we continue to provide this service for free, or do we defer back to the health department, because technically it's their responsibility? We were doing it on a reimbursement basis. So then again, they started shifting the responsibility to the health department, and the health department started running out of immunizations. They were not prepared for that influx of clients coming in. You know, so again, I'm looking at this at the service providers. Usually, when you go to county board meetings, how often do you ever hear anything about those programs? Nothing. I'm going to start asking questions to make sure that their needs are highlighted.
Or at least taken care of.
Right.
All right. I mean I'm good there. You
I'm
good? All right. Next question.
Go for it.
All right. What do you see as the most pressing needs for infrastructure or capital projects in the county?
That is a very good question. Well, and again, I think what I look at is in terms of infrastructure. You know, I drive in the middle of nowhere and I see the county roads that need repair. I've seen some bridges that have been closed for months at a time because they're the county's responsibility and they haven't been repaired. You know, again, I know that the health department is actually in the process of, actually they're tearing down one building and jamming everybody else into another building. You know, other than that, it's I'll be honest, it is not an area that I had explored, other than what I see every day when I drive around in the county. You know, I think that there's always been conversation about how the county's laid out, where basically everything is in Woodstock. Is it better to have all of the county facilities in Woodstock versus having a more diversified structure and having county services spread out more across the county? You know, and I think that now that the county is beginning to grow, regardless of what Mr. Frank says, you know, that again is going to have to be explored. Is it better to add on in Woodstock, or start looking at having different locations across the county so that it's more convenient?
No.
Should I follow up with my standardized question that I've come up with?
Go ahead.
Now, when people talk about capital projects and infrastructure, they always think roads and bridges. I, as an IT guy, think of telecommunications infrastructure, which is severely lacking in this county. To kind of draw that into your previous comment about distributing, you know, offices for county throughout the county, I think that you might need to upgrade the telecommunications infrastructure, or look into, you know, the board making a motion for that. What do you think about the telecommunications infrastructure and its impact on not only the citizens but the county government and businesses?
Well, actually, let me add on something here so maybe he doesn't know about it. I believe it was, what's that city or the county in Tennessee that has their own fiber program?
There's, it's not just in Tennessee.
Well, I know it's not just Tennessee, but that's like
number.
that was like one of the first ones.
Yeah,
I can't remember the
don't
city
remember
or the town,
county,
but
yeah.
they set it up, and it was one of the first entire county, well, at first it was in one city, and then they just branched it out and kept going. It's county run, you pay the county, it's half as much as any internet service provider in the area, and it's 10 times faster. And they have no legal bounds to block you from anything, because it's against, you know, First Amendment rules and all that stuff. If McHenry County were to use something similar to that, just to fund it, just to fund itself, would that be more along the lines of something you'd be looking into as far as branching out the offices and all that kind of other
Oh,
stuff?
definitely. In fact, I know, just because I live in Woodstock, that they have already run a high-speed line through Woodstock. And I know that at least there's been conversations about what are we going to do with it? How are we going to expand that? No, I would definitely, again, I think one of the roles of government is to lay down the infrastructure to then support business. You know, and obviously if it's something that could be modeled after Tennessee, where they laid down the infrastructure but then kind of commercialized it to some level for the benefit of the taxpayers, where they're now getting paid customers to use this. No, I would see that as a win-win. You know, I also, you know, our modern GPS system, that started out as a military application. GPS was for the military. And obviously they diversified it, and now everybody has GPS. The same thing, obviously, the history of the internet, it started out as a government program to connect universities, and then it was commercialized. So I definitely think that one of the roles of government is to provide that basic infrastructure that then can be expanded on for the benefit of consumers, businesses, whatnot. But yes, sometimes, I don't want to depend on Elon Musk to better my life. Not that I don't like Elon Musk, but I don't want to have to depend on a billionaire to improve my life. I pay taxes, and if there's a way for government to make that initial investment, the same as with education and with roads, I see that as part of their purpose is to lay down that investment, and then again, as entrepreneurs come in and provide opportunities, we'll run with it. But at least the government laid down the framework.
All right.
I'm good, you good?
I'm good. You good? You ready for the next one?
Sure.
All right. So, should any part of the county budget be shielded from cuts? And if so, which ones?
Right now, I can't think of any. Obviously, as a social worker, I would look more cautiously at looking at cuts at services that directly impact people's well-being. That being said, there's always ways to do things better where you can cut something and not, where you can cut funding and not cut service. And again, I'm a big supporter of public-private partnerships. When I was running a social service agency, that was one of the things we did. We did partnerships with the state and with the county, because we provided the same service, but we were able to utilize volunteers. We were able to utilize interns, which were not available in other capacities. So again, I would be leery of cuts that then impact the well-being of people. But no, on the other hand, I don't think that there are any sacred cows. I think that everything should be looked at across the board.
I'm good. You good?
I'm good.
All right, our last one, and I'm fully expecting a bit of a rant here from you, and just because I know you, I've talked to you a few times. What do you think about the ICE contract with Mchenry County Sheriff?
It's blood money. And actually, I put a little bit of history because I know the history of this contract.
Feel free.
Because obviously the ICE contract has become very controversial now. It was controversial when it was initiated back in 2005. At the time, again, life was very different in 2005. At the time, the jail had been built. The fourth floor was roughed out. They couldn't they couldn't house anybody on the fourth floor at the time. And ICE at the time was desperate for space. And I'd had the opportunity to visit other detention centers across the region through some other work I was doing. And detainees were being treated pretty poorly in those facilities. And ICE had gotten so bad that I had heard that sometimes if they didn't have a place to put all the detainees for the night, they would literally rent out the entire floor of a hotel, put marshals at all the exits, and that's where they would stay that night. And then they'd put them on a bus and find somewhere else to keep them for the next night. So again, the sheriff at the time was Sheriff Nygren. He saw an opportunity. In 2005, the county was still growing and was still one of the fastest growing in the county. So he felt he needed the space. He needed that fourth floor, or was going to need it in 10 years. So he worked a deal with ICE at the time. He got the federal government to pay for the construction of the fourth floor. And then he signed on for a 10-year contract. And again, at the time, he was very open. I actually got the tour of the facility. We met pretty regularly. Initially, it sounds terrible. I mean, the detention center at the jail was called the Taj Mahal of detention centers. They were treated well. Again, I'm opposed to detention as a whole. But at the time, I saw this as a step forward because at least they were going to be treated well. They were going to be kept local. And again, at least the sheriff at the time was very open. We were able to have regular communication with regards to the status of detainees at the jail. And then a couple of things happened after the jail was built, after the detention center opened. The economy tanked, so clearly the growth was not going to be there. And again, when the jail was first built, or when the detention facility was first built, electronic monitoring was just starting to get on the forefront. Again, we're talking 2005. States had just started using it. County had just started using it. It had not been approved for federal detainees yet. Electronic monitoring started for federal detainees probably 2007, 2008.
Now, when you say electronic monitoring, you
Ankle bracelets.
Thank you.
Ankle bracelets. So that was one thing that impacted ICE's need for capacity, for detention capacity. You know, judges were starting to release people on ankle bracelets. They didn't need the detention space. The other thing that happened is, again, in 2005, ICE was desperate for space. As time went along, ICE started setting up contracts with other places. And honestly, other places that are cheaper. You know, Mchenry County charges $95 a day. I believe there's 2 facilities in Wisconsin that charge $70. You know, so again, that then had an impact on the jail. So care started to suffer at the jail because they sounds terrible, they weren't making their numbers. You know, their numbers were down. They were having to cut costs, and the care of the detainees was starting to suffer. You know, and then the other thing that really kind of started to develop, and this goes to the question of oversight, was the one area where where Sheriff Nygren was not transparent was in how much money's coming in and where am I spending it. You know, that was never clearly answered, and again, because the sheriff is seen as the most powerful person, they didn't really hold him to task. It started to become a question during the last election, where Sheriff Prim was running for his first term, and the contract actually was up for renegotiation, because it was a 10-year contract. So now again, you're getting to 2015, and there was a lot of debate. Again, at that point, the county board was trying to pull information. Nygren wasn't running for re-election, but he had someone selected that he had anointed to run in his position, and then Sheriff Prim was running in a contested Republican primary. So that was an opportunity for the board to pull information. They still didn't get it. You know, and even with ICE was not being very flexible. I believe that the only thing that the board was able to get from ICE when they renegotiated the contract was a 30-day out clause. You know, where pretty much ICE said, okay, if you want to cancel the contract, you give us 30 days notice, we'll move our people out. And Prim basically told the board, I'll clean up the program. I'll get you the information you want. He never got them the information. And right now, again, I think it devolved from being a good program to being a moneymaker, you know, to being a profit center for the county. Over the course of time, things that used to be, again, I know just from talking to folks that are detained there, things that were free now cost money. You know, and they keep charging more for phone service, for commissary items.
That's a huge problem in jails across the country, whether they're ICE detention centers or for-profit prisons.
You know, and in many ways, that, I mean, you know, there's obviously a big concern about private prisons, in many ways, the county is acting as a private contractor to ICE. So again, at this point, at a minimum, I think that there needs to be more oversight so that the county board and the county residents can really make a decision. Is this something that we want to continue? It may have been a good idea 13 years ago, but is it still a good idea? And is it? And obviously, I don't know that targeted deportation was an issue back in 2005. And obviously, under President Obama, he made very clear when he changed his priorities that interior enforcement was not an issue. He was focusing on the border. So again, the activity level of ICE was less. I was around when they were doing work police raids. That stopped. The ICE was not seen as a Gestapo police agency anymore, or back then. Now it has evolved into this, above the law police agency that has no limits and has no bounds and has no oversight at the federal level. So just the function of removal of immigrants has become weaponized. And again, that's the other reason that pushed me to really start asking questions and really be opposed to the contract. I think we need, again, at a minimum, we need to get more oversight over that animal to see if it's something we even want to keep.
I appreciate all that background on the ICE detention facility, the history, or that's here in the county. The history of everything that happened there. So I mean, ultimately, though, when it comes down to it, if you could, I guess my follow-up question is, if you could wave a magic wand and deal with because you said you're against the ICE contract for the facility, if you could wave a magic wand and fix it, what would you do?
Fix the contract?
Fix the contract. Deal with the situation as well, because I mean, when ICE goes and collects somebody, let's say that is here illegally, that is a criminal, they've got to hold them somewhere, as if they are going to deport them. So how would you fix the problem, but still have that? You know what I mean?
I want to add on to that one too.
Go ahead.
Because as I'm seeing this, is that if you have the county doing something, with ICE or whatever, if the county backs out, that just opens up another spot down the street for another for-profit prison, where it could be 15 times worse. But at least here...
You mean like the ones in Texas?
Right.
Not even Texas. There's one in southern Illinois that's atrocious.
Oh, yeah, I heard about that one too. So, pretty much that just backlogging onto that is that...
How do you fix it without breaking it further?
Right.
Well, I think there's a couple of things that can happen. Again, first, the county board has to take more ownership over that contract and more oversight. They have to be more aggressive in getting details from the sheriff.
Not to interrupt you, but who has the exact authority on this? Is it the sheriff or is it the county board?
The county board signs a contract.
Okay.
Yeah, I think sheriff just proposes the contract. It's up to the county board. The sheriff has no power
That's what
there.
I thought. Okay, just want to make sure.
You have no power here. No.
Other than that, I think there's a lot of other opportunities to provide oversight over that program. We already have ministerial visiting going on at the jail. I think granted, I know that it's being restructured, but I know one of the big improvements that happened with the Chicago Police Department is when they created a civilian oversight program, where then you had civilians that were not elected officials that were overseeing the actions and the duties of the police department. So that then the more eyes you have on it, the less secrets you have. So that you don't hear about negative actions at the jail after the fact. You already have eyes on there, and you don't hear about it when somebody dies. So again, I would throw out the idea of creating some sort of civilian oversight, where again, which, under Sheriff Nygren, that was something he did on his own. He was regularly communicating with Latino leaders across the county about what was happening at the jail. He would take our phone calls if we started hearing information in the community about the conditions at the facility. You haven't gotten that from Sheriff Nygren, or excuse me, from Sheriff Prim. I don't know the specifics and the legalities, but I don't know where that wouldn't be possible to create some sort of civilian advisory board or whatnot, but that again, statutorily has access to the jail, has access to the program, has access to Prim.
I like that. That sounds like a good idea there.
And obviously they would then have access if there is some sort of negative event within the facility. Again, I would go so far as for them to have some sort of oversight authority to review what happened. Again, whenever, from what I read in the paper and what I see on TV, whenever there is a questionable shooting in Chicago, it goes to COPA. It goes to the Citizens Oversight Panel and Authority. And they have access to the records. They have the right to interview people and draw their own conclusions separate from CPD administration.
And they would present those findings to the board.
Yes.
All right.
But it's also a public document, so it gets released to the media.
Right, of course, because anything presented to the board becomes a public
Right.
document. I think I'm good there. Got no more follow-up questions there.
No, I'm good on that one.
All right. For our last
Yeah,
kind
well, look, I'll even
ahead.
throw something. What is going to be the question, and I think would be, again, once we get information, according to the last thing I saw in the newspaper, again, the jail is a profit center. What are you going to do with the money that is not coming in? And I think that would be one of the harder questions that the county board would have to address again, if they were looking at canceling the contract. Where are you going to replace $14 million?
There goes the 10% cut.
you mean the 10% cut that's like 5 cents
Yeah,
on
exactly.
Now again, from what I remember, when these debates were going on in 2015, the board did actually do some research, because again, there are options for the fourth floor. Right now it's being rented to ICE detainees. They ran some preliminary numbers. I don't think they came up with a conclusion because they signed the contract, but I know questions were asked. Can we rent it to other jails as overflow? Can we take detainees from Winnebago County or from Lake County when they're at capacity, which does happen from what I'm told, where they have to double up or whatnot? Can we offer the jail as an overflow for other counties? Can we modify a section of the fourth floor to take juveniles? Right now, Mchenry County send our juveniles to Kane County, and I think Kane County charges us $75 a day, for juveniles. And again, what would be the cost for modifying part of the fourth floor to take juveniles? Or again, ultimately, if it winds up that you don't use it, what would be the legacy cost of just keeping the heat on and keeping the plumbing going?
So I want to line those two numbers up. How much are we charged for juveniles?
I believe it's $75 a day.
And how much do we get from ICE?
It's $95 a day.
Okay. So I just wanted to line those two numbers up together for everybody. That's all. So I mean, you think about that, you get $95, but that space could be used by instead for a juvenile that we're now sending off somewhere. And if we do a 1-for-1, you're really not getting $95.
Right.
So, think we're good there. You good there?
Yeah.
All right. I think we got one last little bit here. This is kind of like the free-for-all moment.
That we're all been waiting for. Now you, as a person running for county board, what questions do you have for its citizens? What questions do you want to put out to the citizens to make them either think or take action or follow something or, just to do something?
Kind of like what's your closing statement? What's your last
Right.
What do you want to close with here? You've got the mic. You've got our whole 8 watts of radio power. What do you want to close with as your closing statement that you leave everybody with?
Well, I would say that to the listeners, county government is just as important, if not more important, than state government or national government. And this was a message that I share on the door. You should be getting just as much information about what's happening at the county board as you get as what's happening in Springfield and Washington. In fact, that's been one of my talking points on the doors. Is, I mean, right now, I get more information about what's happening in Washington and in Springfield through emails and Facebook and Twitter. I get nothing about what's happening at the county board until after it happens. And that needs to change. And I think part of the reason why our residents don't understand what the county board does is because there is not that communication with county board members and with county government. And that needs to change. County residents come in contact with county government more than they probably understand. Again, as soon as you leave the municipal limits, you're coming in contact with county government. Unfortunately, if you've ever had the opportunity to spend time at the county jail, or if you go to the county building, you're coming in contact with county government. And you need to pay attention to that, but also the county needs to do a better job of getting information to you so that you can be involved in that decision-making process. One of the commitments I've made as a candidate is that if I was to get elected, I would start doing that. I would start pushing information out. This is what's going to be debated at my committee meeting. This is what's going to be debated. This is your opportunity to impact local government. Now you have the information. Do something about it. It could be whatever issue you're interested in: environment, transportation, social services, law enforcement.
Don't panic, McHenry County. I think I'm going to go on the record and speak out of turn here, even without consulting Brett. Don't panic, McHenry County would love to help disseminate that.
Thank you. And then obviously, if I was to get elected, one of my many goals would be to push county government to then obviously operationalize that internally. And I've come up with the phrase, county government has gotten better at being passively transparent. Sure, they put stuff up on the website, but you got to go find it. They need to become actively transparent. They need to start pushing that information out. Hey, this is what's good. I signed up for the McHenry County newsletter, so I give them my email. That's something specific. I look for it. I read it. I don't see why the county couldn't do the same thing. You're interested in environmental issues? Click here, and you'll get an email every time environmental issues are coming up on committee, or every time that it's going to be discussed at the board level.
You're talking about the from the Northwest Herald,
From the Northwest
their
Herald.
McHenry County newsletter that, as well, was like, why isn't this something the county?
The
does?
county's doing exactly. And again, I'm assuming you said you're a tech guy. It probably wouldn't cost much.
Like nothing.
Actually, if I remember correctly, McHenry County has their own servers, right?
Multiple
Yeah, so
different, varying degrees thereof.
right, because of security and whatnot. I know because for
Yeah.
records and whatever. But is their website on their own servers, or is that?
I don't believe so. I would have to do some poking
Yeah.
to figure out where those are hosted.
Well, we got something to start poking at.
I can poke.
But again, I think that would be the next step, is to push that information out, so that people then feel that they have an opportunity to impact that decision-making process instead of complaining about it after it happens. Sometimes, and I'm sure it's happened with you guys, sometimes we find out about what's happening at the county building beforehand out of dumb luck. Somebody happened to do something on the website and said, holy crap.
Yeah, that's how I found out about the redistricting thing that they wanted to do.
Yeah.
Like 3 days before it was supposed
Exactly.
to happen. I'm like, what? Whoa.
Yeah.
And when we knew, we acted
Oh, yeah.
well. So again, I think that passion is there. there just needs to be the conduit.
All right. I appreciate that. Anything else closing statement wise? Other than, get out and vote for
Go
you?
out and vote.
Get out and vote for me, and if get out and vote. This is critical. This is a critical off-cycle election. Vote for me. Vote for Frank. Vote for Democrats. I think 23-1 is atrocious.
A little skewed.
A little skewed. It provides an opportunity for new ideas, and a different kind of discussion. But the most important thing is you gotta get out and vote.
And that's one thing we like to push here. That's one of my favorite sayings. I don't give a shit who you vote for. Just go out and vote.
All right. Well, I think that we're approaching just past our hour mark here. So I think we can go ahead and wrap this one up if you're good to go.
I'm good to go. Thank you guys so much for the invitation.
Thank you,
really
Carlos.
appreciated it.
All right. Once again, this is. Do you want to give a closing of your name, and then we'll roll it on out.
I'm Carlos Acosta, Democratic candidate for McHenry County Board District 5.
Good night, everybody.